It's the kids who are showing us the way.
The president has moved Trayvon Martin up to be a symbol of racial profiling in America.
A remarkable admission sparked by divisive questions.
He did not walk to the podium for an impromptu address to the nation. He was pushed to that podium.
I disagree with Tavis. He walked to the podium. He wasn't pushed to the podium.
I need to talk to more to my Hispanic organizations in my state. I need to talk to more African-American organizations.
Gangs have increased by 40% since this president was elected. There is no federal program to stop it. No one wants to have an honest conversation about it.
We need to tone down this rhetoric.
I think the country's moved on, and I wish the president would too.
I'd rather have a message of coming together and discussing these issues rather than condemning.
Dr. Carson, you really cannot ignore the fact that our young black men, in fact, our profile.
People keep making him as if he's the black president. He's the president who happens to be black.
Became the disruptor-in-chief this week as his unannounced remarks from Friday continue to shake up the conversation about race, social justice, and stand-your-ground laws across our country. Now, as the president made his remarks, Detroit continued to make headlines as it became the largest U.S. municipality ever to file for bankruptcy on Thursday. It's an issue we will no doubt continue to discuss and debate, along with the interplay of race and class and the overall state of the American economy. Joining me are political reporter for the Huffington Post, Sabrina Siddiqui, and strategist Mo Alithi. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So, Mo, I want to start with you because there's been a lot of criticism, should the president give the speech? Shouldn't he have? Janet Langhart-Cohen said yes. One of our colleagues said no. And some are saying, Rich Benjamin kind of said that he didn't think it was enough, and it got quite a reaction. And then Tavis Smiley, who's also long been a critic of the president. Let's listen to his take, and then I want to get yours on the other side.
I appreciate and applaud the fact that the president did finally show up. But this town has been spinning a story that's not altogether true. He did not walk to the podium for an impromptu address to the nation. He was pushed to that podium. And the bottom line is, this is not Libya. This is America. On this issue, you cannot lead from behind. What's lacking in this moment is moral leadership.
Well, what's your take on that, Mo? Because I disagree with Tavis on a number of fronts, but I want to get your take.
Yeah, I do too. Look, we're talking, right? And that's the first step towards ever fixing any problem, is we're talking. And it's unfortunate that it took a tragedy to bring us to a conversation, but I do think the president did the right thing in stepping up and having a conversation with the American people, not just about race. I think that there are a whole lot of divisions in our country, a whole lot of different groups that feel disenfranchised, a whole lot of different people, that deal with racism, sexism, ageism, you name the ism. There's a lot of that out there. And so being able to have a conversation that focuses on those divisions is a good thing.
And Mo, to that point, politically speaking, I also think that, the timing of when the president would speak and what he would say really mattered. And I think he, of all people, was very aware of that. And to some degree, I think, America's reaction to the announcement last weekend needed to run its course a little bit. And I think sometimes, people don't give him credit for recognizing that he has to do some of these things on a different time frame than we might like, but it's still, when he does it, it still matters.
I think that's right. Leadership is not just about leading the conversation, but it's knowing when the moment is and seizing it. And I think he did that. I think you're right, letting the dust settle just enough, but stepping up while people could actually have a rational conversation about it was, I think, the right thing to do. It's
interesting. I wonder what the reaction would have been if President Obama was a white president, because clearly it was a verdict that needed commentary. And if he was a white president, I wonder if we would have had a different reaction to how and when he had done it. Sabrina, I want to talk about John McCain, of all people. He actually praised the speech. Let's take a listen.
What I got out of the president's statement, which I thought was very impressive, is that we need to have more conversation in America. I, as an elected official, I need to talk more to my Hispanic organizations in my state. I need to talk to more African-American organizations. I need Americans to talk to their friends and neighbors.
You know, beyond the talk shows, and I think what the president called for in terms of having a conversation and what John McCain is talking about, what is really going to come out of the president's speech starting tomorrow? What can we really do?
Well, in addition to the conversation that is being had in households now after the president's speech, he did address the need to possibly revisit stand your ground laws, and I think he did so in a very effective way because he asked a very critical question. He said if the tables had been turned, if Trayvon Martin was the one who used deadly force to protect himself because he felt threatened, would he have been justified? And if he wouldn't have been justified, then we should revisit stand your ground laws, and that is what's going to be taking place. You know, the Senate will actually be holding hearings on stand your ground laws. They will talk about issues of gun violence. They'll talk about how race plays a role in how those laws are applied. So that is kind of the next step, and I think it'll be critical for the momentum to keep going, for people to keep talking about Trayvon Martin, who's really a symbol of the need to revisit these laws in order for something to actually come out of it.
You know, Mo, to that point, I mean, stand your ground laws obviously were part of the focus. Senator McCain actually said this morning that he thinks we need to look into it. We've got some sound in, but I'm not going to play. But it was interesting to hear Senator McCain, of all people, you know, again, make the point that, yeah, maybe we do need to take a look at these stand your ground laws.
No, and there's no question we need to. You know, just look at what happened in Florida. You know, at the same time that that George Zimmerman was acquitted, there was the young woman who was sentenced to 20 years for firing a warning shot, not injuring, for firing a warning shot when out of fear that her ex-husband or her husband was going to abuse her. She got 20 years. She wasn't seen as standing her ground. So there are some inequities there, and I don't know the details of that case, but it at least has given us enough pause and enough reason to look at these laws and figure out how to make them better or whether or not we need them in the first place.
You know, I think as part of that, I mean, part of what came out of this case, and I think part of what we're talking about here when we talk about stand your ground laws and sort of the application of justice, as the president was talking about, and then when you think about Detroit filing for bankruptcy, there has been a lot of talk about sort of what are the racial implications of that. I mean, you have a city that is more than 80% African American, and it is surrounded by mostly white, affluent suburbs. So, Sabrina, I want to get your thoughts on sort of how that really plays into these issues of class and race as we kind of shift and look at what's happening in Detroit.
Absolutely. That's another conversation that needs to be had. What happened in Detroit has been in the making for decades, and you can make a direct correlation between what happened in Detroit and segregation and disinvestment. Now, it's not unique to Detroit, but it certainly has been more extreme in Detroit. So there needs to be a conversation about other similar cases in urban areas where you have sort of a majority-minority population, and ultimately there hasn't been much job creation, living under very poor public services, and ultimately that does come down to the impact of the post sort of 1967 relationship between, as you mentioned, sort of the black community in Detroit and most of the white community fleeing to more affluent surrounding suburbs.
You know, Mo, last question to you. I mean, because it's not just Detroit, and the mayor of Detroit made that point this morning. We know there are a number of other American cities that have either filed for bankruptcy or in some state of heading down that path. And I think there's a bigger question that we're going to be talking about going forward in terms of what does this mean for our economy, for infrastructure in this country, for job creation in this country, and sort of the way we've become increasingly polarized and basically segregated, not just along race, but really along class lines. And how do we deal with those income disparities?
Yeah, I think we need to have a serious recalibration when it comes to urban policy. You know, I'm a political strategist, and every election year when I'm working on a statewide campaign, I'm focused singularly on the suburbs. That's where the political power has gone, and so our political figures are all focused on suburban voters and suburban policies. And I think we just need to kind of pause for a second, not neglect our suburban voters, not neglect our rural voters, but make sure we're speaking to everybody. And our urban areas, our cities, are struggling. We've got to do something about that.
I completely agree, and I really hope that Democrats going forward, I know you're a strategist, so I'm going to give you my advice. I hope that in 2014 we actually do that and that we really put an emphasis on turnout in some of these areas because people need to have the political power. Sabrina Siddiqui and Mo Alithi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Next, first, do no harm. It's a concept that John Boehner has really never heard of.